Guess I'll see you around.
No, don't think so. When I'm out, I'm out.
I'm out too. Mike.
Kid, just look out for yourself.
I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are two of the best shows of all time, but the one thing I would change out of all of it is how Mike Ehrmantraut's story ends.
You finish Breaking Bad, I die, I tell Vince that was a mistake.
From him leaving his granddaughter at the park, to even his final line being something that Jonathan Banks, the actor for Mike, didn't completely agree with. How Mike's story ended is to this day one of those TV fates that I don't think needed to happen. This is the thing with Better Call Saul, it was so great, you saw so much more of Mike's character, but with the ending of his story already sealed in Breaking Bad, it just made his tragic fate that much more sour. But what if Mike survived? In this video, we're going to answer that very question. First, let me remind you how Mike died. The DEA were onto Mike, so he calls Saul to get someone to bring him his bag of money. Walter goes. On arrival, before he hands the bag over, Walter says he's going to need the names of the men inside that are being paid off to keep quiet. Mike refuses, and this argument ends in Mike going back to his car, opening up his bag of money, and realizing his gun is missing. Walter's ego takes over, he storms back to the car and shoots Mike. Mike accelerates and crashes into a rock, gets out and sits in front of the Rio Grande River.
I just realized that Lydia has the names. I can get them from her. I'm sorry, Mike. This whole thing could have been avoided. Shut the up and let me die in peace.
Mike falls. So we need to save Mike from this scene. Now we could just say Mike left like he intended to and that's the end of his story, or that he somehow escapes Walter and then he appears later in El Camino, but let's be realistic about it. This argument still happened, we can't avoid that, and we should still have Walter shoot him so that we still get that scene where we see how far Walter's ego has gone. We then next see Mike in the back of Walter's car. Now what I find interesting about it is we don't actually see either Walter or Todd actually putting Mike in that barrel. We don't even see the remains of Mike. It's completed off screen. In fact, Walter likely left it to Todd as he was clearly preoccupied. So in this timeline, after Jesse walks in and nearly catches them, Walter, stirred up by Jesse's arrival, leaves Todd to deal with Mike's body, and as he's trying to lift him up and drag him into the barrel, Todd looks down at Mike with that same almost childlike, guilty look that he gave Walter, and he sees that he's still breathing. He puts Mike in the back of his car and he takes him to a certain vet, Caldera.
I brought him with me. He's right over there in that truck.
Jesus. Not here. Let me go grab my bag and tell my staff. Jesus.
If you think Todd wouldn't do this, you need to remember that he's half-witted and or psychopathic. Believe it or not, he doesn't really have an anchor of loyalty. In the show's finale, Jack and his men were all dead and he was more marvelling at Walter's device.
Mr. White.
Todd respected Walter, and although not as much, he definitely respected Mike as a figure of authority in the business. If Walter left and told him to deal with it, and he looks down and sees Mike still breathing, I don't think he would have thought to continue to put him in the barrel, nor thought to even tell Walter after. Now of course, Caldera retired from the underworld back in season 6 of Better Call Saul, so at this point, he's been done for years. After he patches Mike up, he makes it clear that he's going to need to be paid much more for this massive risk that he's taken. Saving Mike was no easy or safe job. Even though this is nearly a year before the Heisenberg case would be some big national hunt, even at this point, dealing with Mike is still a massive risk. This reminds Mike of his first motive. He's gonna need money. After being in hiding and resting, Mike is ready to start making moves. By the time he's ready, Ozymandias has just happened, so Jack and his men have just killed Hank and Steve Gomez. They've taken Jesse, and they've taken all of Walter's money, apart from that one barrel. He's not greedy. His first idea is to contact Lydia, but she's nowhere to be found. She doesn't answer to Mike's calls, and no one is ever home. With Walter, Saul, and Jesse all disappearing, he looks into Todd's uncle's gang, which of course he already mentioned, knowing about when he employed Todd back with Walter and Jesse.
It's true, though, he does have some connections. Is this a problem? No, it's nothing to be concerned about. It came up in the background I did on it. Didn't worry me then. It's just flexing.
He researches their affiliation with other businesses and comes across a recent transaction with Candy Welding.
Feeling cautious?
Mike asks Neil Candy how Blue Crystal is still being produced, and he brags that he saw Jesse Pinkman in Jack Welker's facility. Mike is now aware that Jesse is in captivity. He's not dead, but he's not yet free. So Mike arranges a meeting with Jack through Neil Candy.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one.
Or if you wanted a really raw, just 2013 Breaking Bad storyline, you could say he just calls Jack himself. As for all we know, the Candy welding stuff was purely created for El Camino, which came out years later. With that being said, back when Breaking Bad was finishing, there were already rumours of a Jesse movie, back when it was called Greenbrier. So I think the story and stuff like Candy welding, although we only saw it in 2019, I think was always an idea. Since back when season 5 was being made, Mike is allowed into the compound to discuss if all their names are definitely clear from the DEA. But of course, this is his way of eyeing out the place, seeing where they could keep Walt's money, and if Jesse's even here. After his meeting with Jack, as he's leaving, he hears whimpering coming from the cage in the ground below. Mike's heart sinks and he's clearly affected. He knows this is Jesse.
I've changed my mind. Thank you. I don't need anything at this time.
The most haunting thing about this is that Todd knows that Mike knows that's Jesse, and I don't think Todd would show shame, but that almost childlike sadness. Not empathy, sympathy. With Todd having told Jack about the train heist, Jack would probably notice this too and enjoy it. With Mike now knowing what the place looks like from inside, he returns and breaks in just hours later. He takes out the first of Jack's men. He begins his search for the money, but it's nowhere to be found. His only choice is to confront them.
I knocked on his door and stuff, and he was right there. He's got a gun. He's got.
Hey, Kenny, is this cry through the entire thing?
Just watch.
You know, you don't have to do this. Then we turn around, and there is this kid on a dirt bike. Drew Sharp.
This is where Mike learns that Jesse had already told the DEA.
And then out of nowhere, Todd, that opie dead-eyed piece of pulls out a gun and again. This is Todd Elquist we're talking about? Boom. Like it was nothing.
Jack demands that Todd gets Jesse. Todd tries saving him, but before he can even pull his gun out,
Money, right? I didn't find any. You wanna know where it is? You pull that trigger, you never. Good.
they don't get Walter's money. Jesse knows where Todd's apartment is, so they both go there. Mike finds the money in the fridge quickly. Now remember, in El Camino, when Jesse found the money himself, he ended up having to split the money with Neil and Casey. This simply wouldn't be an issue with Mike there. He pays back Caldera, and they both go to Ed the Disappearer. Of course, the reason Jesse said he wanted to go to Alaska, we find out is because Mike said that's what he would do if he was Jesse's age, starting fresh.
Yeah, if I were your age, starting fresh. Alaska.
What about Alaska?
So I think at the end of the story they could both go to Alaska and separate into different parts.
This is Alaska? Why is there snow though?
But would Ed think that was a good idea? There is a chance that they don't both go to Alaska. Instead, Mike could go there, and Jesse could even go to New Zealand.
Right on. New Zealand, that's where they made Lord of the Rings. I say we just move there, yo.
As we saw at the end of El Camino, he was still very much thinking of Jane. So perhaps if Ed said Mike could go to Alaska, Jesse would have to go elsewhere, and he could actually get him to New Zealand, which I do believe he could. Then that would be just as fitting, but Alaska's a big place. So I think it would be cool if they both went there. Now, you might say, well, Mike wouldn't really need to disappear into a new life like Jesse, to the extent of Ed the Disappearer. After all, he did have his own plan. He had a passport too, so maybe he's the one that would fly. And that might be true for some time, but not long after the Heisenberg case blew up. As we know now, Kim would come out years after Howard's death, and almost annoyingly name-drop Mike as being heavily involved with Gus Fring. So if the Heisenberg case didn't showcase Mike's complete involvement in itself, Kim certainly did. Mike always felt so guilty about his son dying, and although that was something that was established in Better Call Saul, who's to say that back when he was just in Breaking Bad, that wasn't always a part of his backstory, with Hank mentioning the end of his police career in Philadelphia. Then of course Nacho dies, this time he gets to save Jesse. Mike gets a bit of justice in this timeline. Jesse leaves the letter for Brock. Mike gets to make sure that he gives something back to his family. So in this timeline, Walter doesn't kill Jack and his men. I don't usually do this in my what if videos, but let's say, as an extra timeline, Walter still gets his perfect ending. But we find out in El Camino that Mike is still alive. We finish El Camino with them both alive, and we still get that perfect ending. So I'm gonna let you choose which timeline you prefer. Do you still think Walter should get that perfect ending where he kills all of them, saves Jesse? Or should Walter come back and they're all dealt with? And while he does everything else in the finale, he gets there just a bit too late. Maybe it's good that in this timeline, Walter doesn't get that full win. It's not the perfect ending that happened in Breaking Bad, but it could be a perfect ending. Do you think in the Breaking Bad story, this little extra bit of justice, at least in some parts, should have been done? I think a lot of this stuff would have been more likely and merged with what happened had Better Call Saul been written before.
And there's so many things we're boxed into. Characters we would have killed off that we couldn't. Characters that we would have not killed off that we... Yeah, I mean, because you're completely boxed in. Once you have Breaking Bad, you're completely boxed in with Better Call Saul.
Because in the end, you could say Mike and Jesse were the same. Good people doing bad things. Maybe they really both deserve to have that ending. This is what I think would happen if Mike Ehrmantraut survived Breaking Bad. But we'll never know for sure. What do you think would happen if Mike survived? Do you agree with what I've said? Would you change anything or add anything? Let me know what you think down below. Of course, press the like button on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.
This is Alaska? Why is there snow, though? Why is it so cold?
Hide out in the snow? Who hides out in snow? Mike, man.